3 years. That's how long it had been since I heard my son's voice. No birthday calls. No holiday visits. No replies to my messages. Nothing. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, my phone lit up with a name I had almost stopped hoping to see. Daniel. My hands froze over the kitchen table. For several seconds, I simply stared at the screen, wondering if I was imagining it. Finally, I answered. Hello. Silence. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years spoke quietly. Dad, can we have dinner this Friday? I think it's time we talked. My heart skipped a beat. For a moment, I forgot every sleepless night, every unanswered message, every family gathering where his empty chair reminded me that I was alone. All I heard was one sentence. It's time we talked. I'll be there, I replied without hesitation. The call lasted less than 30 seconds. Yet after it ended, I sat in my chair for nearly an hour, smiling like a man who had just been given a second chance at life. Little did I know. That invitation wasn't the beginning of a reunion. It was the beginning of the darkest week of my life. And if one unexpected stranger hadn't spoken to me at exactly the right moment, I probably wouldn't be here telling you this story today. My name is Edward Hayes. I'm 68 years old. For almost 4 decades, I served as a criminal court judge. Every day, I listened to lies. Some were convincing. Others fell apart within minutes. After years in the courtroom, you develop an instinct. You notice tiny details most people ignore. A nervous glance. A forced smile. A hesitation before answering. Those little things usually tell the truth long before words do. Ironically, when it came to my own family, I ignored every warning sign. 5 years earlier, after my retirement, I made what I believed was the happiest decision of my life. I signed over my family home to my only son as a wedding gift. It wasn't just another house. My late wife and I had spent 27 years building it. Every wall held a memory. Every room carried a piece of our lives. After she passed away, I couldn't bear the silence inside those halls. So when Daniel married his fiancée, Rebecca, I thought giving them the house was the perfect way to keep those memories alive. I even joked during the celebration. Just promise me one thing. Daniel laughed. Anything. Fill this place with grandchildren. Everyone laughed. Including Rebecca. She hugged me tightly. We'll always consider this your home too. Looking back, those words still echo in my head. Not because they were beautiful. Because they were the biggest lie I ever believed. Friday arrived sooner than I expected. I spent nearly an hour deciding which tie to wear. Ridiculous, isn't it? A retired judge worrying about a necktie. But fathers never stop hoping. I even bought Daniel's favorite cheesecake from the bakery we used to visit when he was a little boy. On the drive over, memories flooded my mind. Teaching him how to ride a bicycle. Helping him with school projects. Cheering louder than anyone at his graduation. After his mother died, it had always been just the two of us. I wasn't only his father. I tried my best to be his entire support system. Maybe I wasn't perfect. But every decision I made was out of love. As the familiar neighborhood came into view, my chest tightened. The old maple tree still stood beside the driveway. The porch light was still the same warm color my wife had chosen years ago. Everything looked familiar. Everything. Except the feeling in my stomach. For reasons I couldn't explain. Something felt wrong. I parked across the street and took a slow breath. Don't overthink it. I whispered to myself. They finally called. I picked up the cheesecake. Straightened my jacket. Walked toward the front door. I was only a few steps away. When the side gate opened, a woman hurried toward me. She worked at the house. I recognized her immediately. Maria. She had been helping our family for years. Normally, she greeted everyone with a warm smile. Tonight, her face had gone completely pale. She looked over both shoulders before grabbing my arm. Her voice was barely louder than a whisper. Mr. Hayes. Her hands were trembling. You cannot go inside. I frowned. What happened? She shook her head rapidly. No time. Her eyes filled with panic. They are waiting for you. I felt the blood drain from my face. What do you mean? She leaned closer. So they won't hear us. Then she whispered 7 words that changed everything. If you trust me, leave right now. I searched her face. She wasn't confused. She wasn't exaggerating. She was terrified. And somehow, that frightened me even more. For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. The evening breeze rustled the trees, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. Maria refused to let go of my sleeve. Please, she whispered. If you ever trusted me before, trust me now. I had spent 38 years deciding whether people were telling the truth. Most lied with their words. A few lied with their eyes. Maria wasn't lying. Fear like that couldn't be faked. What happened? I asked quietly. I can't explain here. She glanced nervously toward the house. They could come outside any second. My instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. I slowly stepped back from the porch. Maria pointed toward the neighboring property. The hedge beside Mr. Turner's fence. Stay there. I looked at the house that had once belonged to my family. Warm lights glowed through every window. From the outside, it looked peaceful. Comfortable. Safe. Exactly the kind of home where a family should be laughing over dinner. Yet Maria was begging me to run. I nodded once. Without another word, I crossed the lawn and slipped behind the thick hedge bordering the next property. From there, I could still see the front entrance. Maria hurried back inside before anyone noticed she had been gone. Now, all I could do was wait. 5 minutes passed. Nothing happened. I almost convinced myself this had all been a misunderstanding. Maybe Rebecca had another surprise planned. Maybe Maria had overheard part of a conversation and misunderstood it. Then, 2 police cruisers rolled quietly onto the street. No sirens. No flashing lights. Just slow. Deliberate. Silent. Every muscle in my body tightened. 4 officers stepped out. They weren't relaxed. They walked toward the front door with the cautious confidence of people responding to a serious complaint. The door opened before anyone knocked. Rebecca stood there. Even from a distance. Something looked off. Her makeup was smeared. Her eyes appeared red. One shoulder of her blouse was torn. She looked frightened. Or she wanted everyone to believe she was. The officers spoke with her briefly. She pointed inside. Then, she pointed toward the driveway. Toward the exact place where I would have been standing if Maria hadn't stopped me. A cold wave swept through my body. No. This wasn't dinner. This wasn't reconciliation. This was a setup. I remained perfectly still as the officers searched the house, speaking into their radios. Several neighbors peeked through their curtains. A few stepped outside, curious about the unexpected police visit. 10 minutes later, Daniel appeared at the doorway. Even from across the street, I could tell something wasn't right. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't asking questions. He looked nervous, as though he was waiting for someone who never arrived. His eyes repeatedly scanned the driveway, looking for me. The realization hit me like a hammer. They had expected me to walk through that front door. Whatever happened next, it had already been planned. Nearly half an hour passed before the officers finally returned to their vehicles. Nobody searched the neighborhood. Within minutes, the street became quiet again. I stayed hidden. Not because I wanted to. Because I couldn't make my legs move. The house where my wife and I had built our dreams now felt like a place I no longer recognized. Eventually, darkness settled over the neighborhood. Only then did I quietly return to my car. The untouched cheesecake still sat on the passenger seat. I stared at it for several seconds before placing my forehead against the steering wheel. I had imagined tonight 100 different ways. None of them ended with me hiding behind bushes while police searched my former home. The drive back to my apartment felt endless. Every traffic light seemed to last forever. Every mile brought another memory. Daniel's first baseball game. His high school graduation. The day he proudly introduced Rebecca to me. Where had everything gone wrong? Had I missed the signs? Or had someone slowly changed the son I thought I knew? Back inside my apartment, I didn't bother turning on the lights. The silence wrapped around me. I placed the cheesecake on the kitchen counter. Still unopened. Still perfect. Just like the evening that never happened. Sleep was impossible. Instead, I replayed every second over and over again. Rebecca's torn blouse. The police arriving before I ever entered the house. Daniel watching the driveway. Maria risking her job to warn me. None of it was random. It fit together too perfectly. Someone had expected me to become the villain before I ever stepped through the front door. But why? Money. Revenge. Something even worse. One question refused to leave my mind. If Maria hadn't stopped me, what would the police have found when they walked inside? Around 3 in the morning, I finally stood up and walked to my window. Rain had started falling over the city. I watched the drops race down the glass. Then I made a decision. For 3 years, I had waited for my son to come back into my life. Now, I was done waiting. If someone had built a trap for me, I was going to find out who built it. Why they built it. And before this was over, every single lie would come into the light. Because whoever planned tonight had made one very expensive mistake. They assumed I would never fight back. They forgot something. For almost 4 decades, I made a career out of uncovering the truth. And this time, the case was personal. The next morning, I woke after barely 2 hours of sleep. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking like a father. I was thinking like an investigator. Emotion clouds judgment. Facts reveal the truth. If someone had carefully planned what happened the night before, they would have made mistakes. Everyone does. The question was, where? I stared at my phone for almost 5 minutes before dialing Maria's number. She answered before the first ring finished. Mr. Hayes. Her voice sounded exhausted. Are you all right? I should be asking you that, I replied. There was a long pause. I've been praying you listened to me. I did. Another silence. Then I heard what sounded like a door quietly closing. She was making sure no one could overhear us. "Tell me everything," I said. "No matter how small it seems." Maria took a deep breath. "It started 2 nights ago. I was cleaning the hallway upstairs. The study door wasn't completely closed. I wasn't trying to listen. But they were speaking loudly." She hesitated. Rebecca sounded excited. Daniel. Daniel sounded nervous. My grip tightened around the phone. "What were they talking about?" Maria answered softly. "About you." Every word she spoke felt heavier than the last. Rebecca kept saying everything had to happen exactly as planned. She already knew what she was going to wear. She even practiced crying. I felt my heartbeat quicken. Practiced? Yes. Maria swallowed. She stood in front of the mirror pretending to cry. I remember because I thought it was strange. Then she ripped one of her own blouses. I closed my eyes. The torn shoulder. It hadn't happened during an argument. It had been prepared. Days before I arrived. "What about Daniel?" I asked. Maria was quiet for several seconds. He wasn't leading the conversation. He kept asking, "Are you sure this is necessary?" And every time he questioned it, Rebecca convinced him. How? She told him this was their only chance. Their only chance for what? Maria lowered her voice even further. "I don't know." But she kept repeating one sentence. "Once this is over, we'll never have to worry about money again." Money. There it was. Not anger. Not revenge. Money. I heard Daniel ask another question. "What if Dad refuses to come?" Maria sighed. Rebecca laughed. She said, "He'll come. Lonely people always come when family calls." Those words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were cruel. Because she had been right. I had come without asking a single question. Without wondering why 3 years of silence suddenly disappeared. Hope had blinded me. "Then what happened?" I asked. Maria answered almost immediately. Rebecca picked up her phone. I couldn't hear the whole conversation. But I heard enough. "What did she say?" "Yes, around 7. Everything will be ready. We'll call as soon as he arrives." My stomach tightened. So the police. I think they already knew they might receive a call. I can't prove it. But Rebecca sounded very confident. I walked slowly toward my apartment window. Outside, the city continued as if nothing had happened. Cars passed. People laughed. Life moved on. Mine had stopped. "What made you warn me?" I finally asked. Maria didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice shook. "Because I remember your wife. I remember how kind both of you were. When my daughter needed surgery, you paid the hospital bill. You never told anyone. You said, 'Families help each other.'" She began crying quietly. I couldn't stand there and watch someone destroy the man who saved my child. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Some acts of kindness disappear. Others come back years later when you least expect them. "Maria, I need one more favor." "Anything." "Stay where you are. But don't take risks. If they say anything. If they argue. If they make another mistake. I need to know." "I understand." Before hanging up, she whispered one final sentence. Mr. Hayes. They think they've already won. I looked toward the rain-covered window. No. I replied quietly. They've only won if I give up. That afternoon, I unlocked a metal filing cabinet I hadn't opened since retiring. Inside were dozens of old notebooks. Every major case I'd ever handled. Witness behavior. Investigation methods. Interview strategies. Patterns of deception. I wasn't reopening old cases. I was reminding myself how guilty people behave when they believe no one is watching. One notebook contained a sentence I'd written years earlier after convicting a fraud artist. Liars prepare their stories. Truthful people remember events. Rebecca had prepared. She rehearsed. She planned. She even rehearsed tears. That meant somewhere there had to be evidence. Real evidence. Not guesses. Not suspicions. Proof. And proof changes everything. That evening, I drove past the house. Not to confront anyone. Just to observe. Old habits die hard. Daniel's car was parked outside. Rebecca's SUV sat beside it. Through the living room window, I could see them arguing. Rebecca paced back and forth across the room. Daniel remained seated with his head lowered. She pointed toward him repeatedly. He never once pointed back. He simply listened. Or perhaps he endured. As I watched from across the street, another question formed in my mind. Had my son become a willing partner? Or was he trapped in something much bigger than I realized? At that moment, I didn't know. But one thing had become painfully clear. This story wasn't over. It was only beginning. The following morning, my phone rang before sunrise. It was Maria. She sounded frightened. Mr. Hayes, something happened last night. I sat upright. What is it? They fought for nearly 3 hours. About what? You? I remained silent. Maria continued. Rebecca blamed Daniel for everything. She kept saying he was weak. That if he hadn't hesitated, none of this would have happened. My jaw tightened. And Daniel? He kept asking one question. What question? What if my dad already knows? That sentence stayed with me long after the call ended. So, Daniel wasn't acting like someone celebrating a successful plan. He was acting like someone terrified it had failed. Fear changes people. Sometimes it makes them dangerous. Sometimes it makes them tell the truth. I decided it was time to stop reacting. I needed answers. Instead of driving to the old house, I visited someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Michael Grant. A retired investigator, who had testified in dozens of my courtroom cases. He opened the door wearing jeans and an old fishing shirt. Judge Hayes. He smiled. I haven't heard from you in ages. You may not call me Judge after today. He laughed. Trouble. The biggest case of my life. 2 hours later, Michael had listened to everything. Not once did he interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. I believe you. That was quick. I've spent 40 years reading liars. So have you. He folded his arms. The interesting part isn't what they did. It's why. I nodded. Money. Maybe. He shook his head. People don't usually risk prison just for money. They risk prison when they are desperate. His words echoed in my mind. Desperate people make desperate mistakes. Michael opened a notebook. Let's assume they planned to destroy your reputation. What's step 2? I frowned. I don't know. He looked directly at me. No. You do. I closed my eyes. The answer arrived almost instantly. My finances. He smiled. Exactly. If everyone believed you were violent or unstable, they could challenge your decisions. Your property. Your investments. Everything. For the first time, I wasn't looking at isolated events. I was looking at a strategy. And strategies always leave trails. That afternoon, Michael made a few phone calls. By evening, he had already uncovered something unexpected. Daniel and Rebecca hadn't just been struggling financially. They were months behind on multiple payments. Credit cards. Personal loans. Even a business investment that had quietly collapsed. They are running out of options, Michael said. And desperate people often believe one big lie can solve every problem. I looked out the window. No. It only creates bigger problems. As the sun disappeared behind the city skyline, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Maria. The screen displayed a name I hadn't expected. Daniel. For several seconds, I stared at it. Then I answered. Neither of us spoke. Finally, his voice broke the silence. Dad. I need to see you. Before I could respond, someone shouted in the background. A woman's voice. Rebecca. The call ended immediately. I lowered the phone slowly. One thing was certain. The cracks were getting bigger. And sooner or later, someone inside that house was going to tell the truth. I stared at my phone long after the call ended. Daniel had sounded terrified. Not guilty. Not angry. Terrified. That bothered me more than anything else. For years, I'd believed people fit into simple categories. Honest or dishonest. Victim or criminal. Innocent or guilty. Life had taught me otherwise. Sometimes, the guilty are manipulated. And sometimes, the innocent stay silent for so long that they become part of the crime. I still didn't know which one described my son. But I intended to find out. The following afternoon, I agreed to meet him. Not at my apartment. Not at the old house. Somewhere public. A quiet cafe on the edge of town where almost no one knew either of us. I arrived 20 minutes early. Old habits. Always know your surroundings before anyone else arrives. I chose a table facing the entrance. Every customer who walked in passed directly through my line of sight. At exactly 2 o'clock, Daniel entered. For a moment, I barely recognized him. He looked exhausted. His beard had grown uneven. His clothes were wrinkled. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. This wasn't the confident young man I'd watched on his wedding day. This was someone carrying a burden too heavy to hide. He spotted me and hesitated. Then slowly walked over. Hi. Dad. I nodded. Sit. The waiter brought 2 coffees. Neither of us touched them. Daniel kept rubbing his palms together. Something he used to do whenever he was nervous as a child. Some habits never disappear. I don't know where to start, he admitted. The truth usually starts at the beginning. He lowered his head. I made mistakes. That's obvious. But I never wanted. His voice cracked. I never wanted things to go this far. I studied him carefully. No rehearsed speech. No dramatic performance. Just exhaustion. What happened that night? I asked. Daniel swallowed. Rebecca said we needed proof. Proof of what? That you were unstable. I said nothing. He continued. She kept telling me no one would believe us without evidence. So she decided to manufacture it. His eyes filled with shame. I told myself it would never actually happen. You invited me anyway. He closed his eyes. I know. You watched me walk into that trap. I know. You said nothing. I know. Each answer grew quieter. Until they were barely whispers. For nearly a minute. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question that had haunted me for days. Why? Daniel looked at me with tears in his eyes. Because we were drowning. Our debts. Our loans. They were crushing us. I thought we could fix everything. And Rebecca promised this would solve it. I leaned back. So money. It started with money. He nodded slowly. But after a while, it stopped being about money. It became about control. What do you mean? Daniel glanced around the cafe before answering. Rebecca controls everything. Our bank accounts. Our passwords. My phone. My email. Even who I talk to. I frowned. You're an adult. So why stay? He laughed bitterly. You think I haven't asked myself that? I kept believing she'd change. Then every year. It got worse. He looked completely defeated. I don't even recognize my own life anymore. I wanted to believe him. Part of me already did. Another part remembered hiding behind those bushes while police searched the house. Trust isn't rebuilt with words. It's rebuilt with actions. Daniel. He looked up. If you're telling me the truth, you'll have to prove it. I will. No lies. No excuses. No protecting anyone. I understand. Can you do that? He answered without hesitation. Yes. For the first time since this nightmare began. I saw something I hadn't seen in my son for years. Resolve. As we stood to leave, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket. I almost forgot. He slid a small flash drive across the table. I found this hidden in Rebecca's office. I stared at it. What's on it? I don't know. I was afraid to open it. But whatever she's hiding, I think it's here. I picked up the flash drive. It felt almost weightless. Yet somehow heavier than anything I'd ever held. Because deep down, I knew one thing. If the truth was inside that tiny piece of plastic, everything was about to change. The flash drive sat on my desk for nearly an hour. I must have picked it up a dozen times. Every instinct told me the answers were inside. Every instinct also warned me. The truth might be worse than I imagined. I finally plugged it into my laptop. The screen remained blank for a few seconds. Then, a folder appeared. Private. Inside were dozens of files. Bank statements. Property records. Scanned passports. Loan agreements. And one spreadsheet simply titled Master Plan. A chill ran down my spine. I clicked it open. The first few lines made no sense. Dates. Dollar amounts. Property addresses. Then I noticed a column labeled Target. There were names. Elderly names. Different cities. Different states. Some entries had a green checkmark. Others were marked pending. One line stopped me cold. Edward Hayes, active. I stared at the screen. This wasn't just about me. I immediately called Michael. 20 minutes later, he was sitting beside me, scrolling through the files. His expression darkened with every page. This isn't a family dispute anymore. What is it? He looked directly at me. This looks organized. Very organized. He opened another folder. Photographs. Luxury vacations. Expensive jewelry. Designer handbags. New cars. None of it matched Daniel's financial situation. So where did the money come from? Michael clicked another document. My heart nearly stopped. It was a list of bank transfers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Moving through different accounts. Some domestic. Some overseas. Always ending with the same initials. RK Holdings. Do you know this company? I slowly shook my head. No. Neither do I. Just then, another file caught my attention. Video_07. I clicked play. The recording showed Rebecca sitting across from a sharply dressed man inside a private office. His face wasn't visible. Only his voice. Cold. Calm. Professional. You rushed this one. Rebecca folded her arms. He was supposed to walk into the house. He didn't. Then you adapt. We're losing time. I know. You don't understand. He used to be a judge. He'll fight. The man laughed quietly. Everyone fights. Until they realize they are already trapped. The video ended. Michael slowly removed his glasses. This woman isn't working alone. For the next 2 hours we copied every file onto encrypted backup drives. If someone tried deleting the originals, it wouldn't matter. The evidence would survive. Just as we finished, my phone vibrated. Maria. I answered immediately. Mr. Hayes. Her breathing was uneven. They know. My heart skipped. Know what? They know someone took the flash drive. How? I don't know. But Rebecca tore the office apart. She keeps asking Daniel where it went. And? Maria lowered her voice. She's convinced someone inside the house betrayed her. An hour later, Daniel called. His voice was barely recognizable. Dad. You have to leave your apartment. What? Please. Don't ask questions. Just leave. Before I could answer, the line went dead. Michael looked at me. We're not ignoring that. Within 10 minutes we were driving away. Instead of going home, we checked into a small roadside motel nearly 30 miles outside the city. Nothing fancy. Exactly what we wanted. No one would think to look there. That night, neither of us slept. At 2:17 a.m., Michael's phone rang. One of his former colleagues. He answered. Listened. Then slowly lowered the phone. His face had turned pale. What happened? He looked at me. Someone broke into your apartment. My stomach dropped. Were they caught? No. They didn't steal anything valuable. They searched. They left everything else behind. I frowned. What were they looking for? Michael looked toward the laptop resting on the motel table. The flash drive. For the first time, the danger felt real. This wasn't just a bitter family conflict anymore. Someone was willing to break into homes, destroy evidence, and silence anyone standing in their way. I looked at the copied files. Whatever Rebecca had become involved in, it reached far beyond our family. And somewhere, the man whose face never appeared on that video already knew someone had his secrets. I closed the laptop. One thought echoed through my mind. The trap I escaped wasn't the end of the story. It was only the first move in a much larger game. Morning arrived without bringing any comfort. The motel room was silent except for the sound of the air conditioner humming in the background. Michael was already awake, studying the copied files again. I poured myself a cup of coffee. It had gone cold before I took the first sip. Neither of us had slept. Neither of us expected today to be ordinary. Then Michael stopped scrolling. "Edward, you need to see this." He turned the laptop toward me. It was another folder we had overlooked the night before. Its name was simple: Insurance. Inside were scanned life insurance policies. Not one. Not two. 8 of them. Each policy belonged to a different elderly homeowner. Every beneficiary was different. Different relatives. Different signatures. Different cities. Yet every file had one thing in common. Each property had changed ownership shortly before the policy was updated. Michael frowned. "This isn't random." "No. It follows a pattern." He clicked another document. A handwritten note appeared. Step 1, gain trust. Step 2, secure property. Step 3, isolate target. Step 4, control assets. I felt my pulse quicken. Someone had turned betrayal into a business. Before either of us could speak, my phone vibrated. "Maria." I answered immediately. "Are you safe?" She whispered. "For now." "What happened?" "Rebecca packed 2 suitcases. She's leaving." "I don't think so." "Then why pack?" Maria hesitated. I heard her say, "We have to move everything before they find it." Everything. Not anything. Everything. That meant there was more evidence somewhere. A lot more. Michael leaned over. "Ask her where." I nodded. "Maria. Did you hear where they were taking it?" I couldn't hear clearly. But I saw something. "What?" "They carried 3 locked metal boxes into the garage. Then a black SUV arrived. No license plate on the front. 2 men loaded the boxes." "Were they movers?" "No. They looked." She searched for the word. "Professional." The call suddenly ended. No goodbye. No warning. Just silence. I called back immediately. No answer. Again. Straight to voicemail. Michael looked at me. "I don't like this." Neither did I. An hour later, we drove toward the neighborhood. We stayed several streets away. From a distance, we could see the old house. Everything looked normal. Too normal. No moving truck. No police. No activity. Then a familiar figure appeared. Daniel. He walked out carrying a small backpack. He kept looking over his shoulder. Like someone afraid he was being watched. A black sedan rolled slowly behind him. It wasn't following closely. Just enough to keep him in sight. Michael noticed it too. "See that?" "I do." "That's not a coincidence." Daniel reached the corner and hailed a taxi. The black sedan immediately followed. So much for coincidence, Michael muttered. Without saying a word, we pulled into traffic. Not to chase Daniel. To watch the people chasing him. The sedan stayed 3 cars behind the taxi. We stayed behind the sedan. For 20 tense minutes, nobody changed course. Nobody made a mistake. Then suddenly, the taxi turned sharply into an underground parking garage beneath a shopping center. The black sedan followed. Michael looked at me. This feels wrong. It probably is. We parked across the street and waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 15. Neither vehicle came back out. I'll check. Michael shook his head immediately. No. We don't know who's inside. Just then, Daniel called. I answered instantly. Dad. His breathing was frantic. They found out. Found out what? That I gave you the flash drive. Where are you? I don't have much time. They are coming. The line filled with shouting. A loud crash echoed in the background. Then Daniel whispered something I'll never forget. If anything happens to me, don't trust. The call cut off. Dead silence. I called back. Nothing. Again. Nothing. Michael slowly lowered his binoculars. The black sedan was leaving the parking garage. But Daniel's taxi never came out. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't worried about clearing my name. I was worried about saving my son. Whether he deserved forgiveness or not, he was still my son. And someone had just made him disappear. The parking garage suddenly felt colder. Daniel's taxi had vanished. The black sedan had returned. But my son was nowhere to be seen. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Michael placed a hand on my shoulder. Don't rush in. What if he's hurt? And what if that's exactly what they want? His words stopped me. For years, I'd reminded juries that panic leads to mistakes. Now I needed to follow my own advice. We waited another 5 minutes. Nothing. No taxi. No Daniel. No movement. Finally, Michael pointed toward the garage entrance. Security office. A middle-aged guard was standing outside, smoking a cigarette. Michael walked over while I stayed near the car. A few minutes later, he returned. What did he say? The taxi left through the lower exit. There are 2 exits. He nodded. The black sedan never followed. I frowned. Then who was chasing Daniel? I don't know. But somebody wanted us to believe they were. That changed everything. Someone wasn't just hiding the truth. They were controlling what everyone saw. Just then, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered cautiously. Hello. A man's voice replied. Calm. Deep. Completely unfamiliar. Mr. Hayes. Who is this? Someone trying to keep you alive. Every instinct told me to stay quiet. He continued. You're asking the wrong questions. I'm asking exactly the right ones. A soft chuckle echoed through the phone. No. You're looking at Rebecca. You should be looking at the people behind Rebecca. Before I could respond, the call ended. Michael immediately checked the number. Blocked. Untraceable. Professional. This keeps getting bigger, he muttered. I stared at the silent phone. Whoever called knew my name. Knew what I was doing. And knew enough to warn me. But why? That evening we returned to the motel. Waiting wasn't easy. Yet rushing blindly would only make us easier targets. Around 7 o'clock. Maria finally called. I answered before the first ring ended. Maria. She sounded out of breath. I couldn't call sooner. Are you all right? Yes. But Rebecca isn't. What happened? Maria lowered her voice. She's furious. About Daniel. Yes. And about the flash drive. She keeps saying. He ruined everything. I exchanged a glance with Michael. Did she mention where Daniel is? No. But. Maria hesitated. I saw her burn something. What? A stack of papers. Legal papers. Contracts. They are gone. I closed my eyes. Evidence. Destroyed forever. Or so she believed. An hour later. Michael was still reviewing the copied files. Then suddenly. He froze. Edward. What is it? He enlarged one photograph. At first I saw nothing unusual. Just Rebecca standing beside a luxury SUV. Then Michael zoomed into the reflection on the driver's window. There. Barely visible. Was the face of the man from the video. Not clearly enough to identify him. But enough to notice one detail. A silver ring shaped like a wolf's head. Michael leaned back slowly. I've seen that ring before. Where? He didn't answer immediately. Finally he whispered. 10 years ago. During a federal fraud investigation. I looked at him. You think it's the same man? I don't think. I hope I'm wrong. Just then. 3 loud knocks echoed across the motel room door. Neither of us moved. Another knock. Slower this time. Then. A woman's voice. Room service. Michael frowned. We didn't order anything. Silence filled the room. Then a folded envelope slowly slid underneath the door. No footsteps. No voices. Whoever delivered it was already gone. Michael carefully opened the door. The hallway was empty. Only the envelope remained. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 5 words. You're closer than you think. Beneath the message. A small storage unit key had been taped to the page. No address. No explanation. Only one handwritten number. 214. I looked at Michael. He looked back at me. Neither of us spoke. Because we were both thinking the same thing. Someone wasn't trying to stop us anymore. Someone wanted us to find something. Neither of us touched the key for several seconds. Storage Unit 214. No address. No note. No instructions. Just a number. Michael finally broke the silence. This could be evidence. He paused. Or a trap. I picked up the key and turned it over in my fingers. There was one thing engraved on the back. Rivergate Storage. Michael immediately opened his laptop. There are 3 Rivergate facilities within 50 miles. Which one? He searched for a moment. Then stopped. Only one has a Unit 214. I grabbed my coat. We're going. The storage facility sat on the edge of an old industrial district. Rusted warehouses lined both sides of the road. Most of the buildings looked abandoned. A cold wind swept across the empty parking lot. The manager's office was still open. A young employee looked up as we entered. "Can I help you?" Michael placed the key on the counter. "We're here to access this unit." The employee typed something into his computer. A strange expression crossed his face. "That's odd." "What?" "The rent was paid this morning." "By who?" "I'm sorry. I can't give out customer information." He handed us a visitor badge. Unit 214 is in Building C. Neither of us spoke as we walked down the narrow rows of metal doors. The deeper we went, the quieter everything became. Finally, Unit 214. I unlocked the padlock, took a slow breath, and pulled the door upward. The metal shutter rattled loudly before stopping. Inside, there was no furniture, no boxes stacked to the ceiling. Just 5 large plastic containers. And a single wooden desk. Michael switched on his flashlight. The first container held folders. Hundreds of them. Every folder carried a different name. Every name belonged to someone over 65 years old. Addresses. Financial records. Photographs. Medical histories. "This wasn't random," Michael whispered. "They researched every victim." The second container held dozens of cell phones. Some were old flip phones. Others were modern smartphones. Every one of them had a small label attached. "Collected." A chill ran down my spine. Collected. As if they were trophies. The third container was worse. Passports. Birth certificates. Property deeds. Legal documents. Everything someone would need to steal another person's identity. Michael looked at me. "This is enough to send people to prison for decades." I nodded. "If we get it out of here." Then I noticed the wooden desk. There was only one drawer. Inside, a leather notebook. The pages were filled with neat handwriting. Names. Dates. Instructions. Payments. Next to each victim was a short comment. Trust established. Family divided. Transfer pending. I kept turning pages. Then, I found my own name. Edward Hayes. Below it were 4 words. Unexpected complication. Exercise caution. Someone had written those words after I escaped the trap. Which meant whoever ran this operation had been monitoring me ever since. Suddenly, Michael raised his hand. "Listen." Footsteps. Outside. Slow. Deliberate. Someone was walking toward Unit 214. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, the sound of a key sliding into the lock. "They have another key," Michael whispered. The lock turned. Someone was opening the door. Without thinking, Michael switched off the flashlight. We stood perfectly still. The shutter slowly began rising. A narrow strip of daylight appeared. Then a pair of polished black shoes. The visitor stepped inside. He couldn't see us. Not yet. The unit was almost completely dark. He pulled out his phone. "I'll check," he muttered. The old man couldn't have found this place. My heartbeat thundered inside my chest. He took another step. Then another. Only a few feet separated us. Michael silently picked up a heavy metal pipe lying beside the wall. I shook my head. Not yet. The stranger stopped in front of the desk. He noticed the open drawer. His body froze. Very slowly, he turned toward our direction. For one brief second, Neither side moved. Then his eyes widened. You're. Before he could finish the sentence, Michael lunged. The phone flew across the room. The stranger stumbled backward, crashing into a stack of containers. Folders exploded across the floor like confetti. The man scrambled to his feet and sprinted toward the exit. Stop him! I shouted. We chased him into the narrow corridor. He reached a black SUV parked outside. The engine was already running. A second man sat behind the wheel. The passenger dove inside. The tires screamed against the pavement. Within seconds, the SUV disappeared onto the highway. Breathing heavily, Michael bent down and picked up something shining on the ground. A wallet. It must have fallen during the struggle. He opened it. Inside was no driver's license. No cash. Just one identification card. A company ID. The logo was unfamiliar. But the employee photograph wasn't. It was the same man whose reflection we'd seen in Rebecca's photograph. For the first time, we finally had a face. And that meant the hunt had truly begun. The wallet felt unusually heavy. Not because of its weight. Because of what it meant. For the first time since this nightmare began, we weren't chasing shadows anymore. We had a face. A lead. And maybe a way to bring the entire operation crashing down. Michael carefully examined the company ID. The name printed beneath the photograph read Victor Kane. No address. No employee number. Only a silver emblem of a wolf's head. The same symbol we had seen on the mysterious ring. Michael looked at me. That's no coincidence. It never was. Before leaving the storage facility, we photographed everything. Every folder. Every document. Every notebook. Every container. Then Michael called someone he trusted from his years in law enforcement. Not the local police. Not yet. This is bigger than one department, he explained. If the wrong person gets involved, evidence could disappear overnight. 20 minutes later, an unmarked SUV rolled quietly into the parking lot. A woman stepped out. Mid-50s. Confident. Sharp eyes. She introduced herself. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm with the Financial Crimes Task Force. She glanced inside Unit 214. For several moments, she said nothing. Finally she looked back at us. Whoever built this operation, they've been doing it for years. Sarah's team spent nearly 3 hours documenting every piece of evidence. No one removed anything immediately. Instead, they photographed every shelf exactly as it had been found. Why not take it now? I asked. She smiled slightly. Because if they realize we've discovered this place, they'll disappear. So we're watching them instead. Exactly. For the first time, I felt we finally had professionals on our side. As we prepared to leave, Sarah stopped me. Mr. Hayes. Yes? There's something you should know. She handed me a photograph. It showed Victor Kane standing outside a luxury hotel. Beside him, Rebecca. But there was someone else. A third person. But there was someone else. An elderly woman. She looked frightened. Sarah folded her arms. 3 months after this picture was taken, she lost her house. And 6 months later, she disappeared. My heartbeat slowed. Was she ever found? Sarah shook her head. No. The drive back to the motel was completely silent. I couldn't stop thinking about that woman's face. How many others had there been? How many families had been destroyed before mine? Then another thought struck me. If Rebecca had helped ruin other people, then meeting my son couldn't have been an accident. She had chosen him. Chosen our family. Chosen my house. Years before I ever suspected anything. That evening, Daniel called again. This time his voice sounded calmer. Dad. Are you safe? For now. I need to tell you something. I'm listening. I lied. My stomach tightened. What about? It wasn't Rebecca who approached me first. I frowned. What do you mean? I met Victor nearly 4 years ago. Silence filled the line. He invested in my business. He seemed successful. He introduced me to Rebecca. The words hit me like a punch. You didn't meet her by chance. No. It was planned. Daniel's breathing became shaky. I didn't realize it then. But looking back, everything happened too perfectly. The investment. The relationship. The wedding. The pressure to move into your house. It was all connected. I closed my eyes. This wasn't just manipulation. It was infiltration. Someone had entered our lives years earlier. Waiting patiently. Until the perfect moment arrived. Suddenly. Daniel lowered his voice. I found something else. What? Victor is meeting someone tomorrow night. Where? I don't know exactly. But I know the code they use. What code? When they send a text that says, dinner at 8. It doesn't mean dinner. It means everyone meets. My pulse quickened. Can you find the location? I'll try. Be careful. I know. Before hanging up, Daniel whispered something that made the room fall silent. Dad. If I disappear, don't come looking for me. Finish this. The call ended. I stared at the dark screen of my phone. Michael looked at me. What did he say? I repeated every word. When I finished, neither of us spoke. Because we both understood the same thing. Tomorrow night. For the first time. The people behind everything were finally going to gather in one place. And if we played our cards right, this nightmare could finally begin to end. Or it could become far more dangerous than either of us had imagined. An inheritance. They study families for months, Sarah explained. They learn who argues, who has debt, who feels ignored. Then they quietly create opportunities. I frowned. They don't steal. Not at first. She nodded. They make people hand everything over willingly. Michael leaned forward. So Rebecca wasn't the mastermind? No. Sarah answered without hesitation. She was a recruiter. The room fell silent. A very successful recruiter. Just then, Sarah's phone vibrated. She listened for several seconds before ending the call. What happened? Our surveillance team. They followed Victor. Where? A private country club outside the city. I immediately remembered Daniel's warning. Dinner at 8. Sarah smiled. I think we just found tonight's meeting. By sunset, everything was ready. Unmarked vehicles. Plainclothes officers. Hidden cameras. No flashing lights. No uniforms. Sarah wanted everyone inside before making a move. If Victor sees police, he disappears. And everyone else. They'll follow him. At 7:48 p.m., we parked half a mile from the country club. Luxury cars rolled through the front gate one after another. Mercedes, BMWs, Range Rovers. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary business dinner. But Sarah handed me binoculars. Look closely. I focused on the entrance. Rebecca stepped out of a black sedan. She wasn't nervous. She smiled as though she belonged there. Victor greeted her with a handshake. Then, to my surprise, Daniel climbed out of another vehicle. What is he doing? Michael whispered. I don't know. But something was different. Daniel wasn't walking beside Victor. He stayed several steps behind. Watching. Waiting. Almost. As if he were looking for an opportunity. Inside the club, hidden cameras transmitted live footage to Sarah's mobile command van. Nearly 20 people sat around an enormous dining table. Expensive suits. Designer dresses. Crystal glasses. Anyone passing by would think it was a celebration. Then Victor stood. The room became silent. He raised his glass. To new partnerships. And profitable futures. Everyone applauded. Everyone. Except Daniel. He never lifted his glass. Sarah watched the monitor carefully. Something's wrong. What? Daniel keeps touching his watch. I remembered. Years ago, when he was a teenager, he had a habit. Whenever he became anxious, he tapped the side of his wrist over and over. He was doing it now. Then, without warning, Daniel looked directly toward one of the hidden cameras. He couldn't possibly know where it was. Yet he smiled. Very slightly. And adjusted his tie. Sarah suddenly stood up. Freeze that frame. The technician enlarged the image. Tucked beneath Daniel's tie clip was an incredibly small blinking light. A transmitter. Michael's eyes widened. He's wearing a camera. I stared at the screen. My son hadn't walked into that room as Victor's partner. He had walked in wearing a wire. For the first time, Daniel wasn't hiding from the truth. He was risking his life to expose it. And none of us knew whether he'd make it back out alive. Inside the surveillance van, no one spoke. Every eye remained fixed on Daniel. The tiny camera hidden behind his tie transmitted crystal clear video. It wasn't just recording faces. It was recording the truth. Sarah quietly lowered her headset. If they discover that camera. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Victor remained standing at the head of the table. He smiled like a man completely in control. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. For years, we've built something extraordinary. Not through force. Not through violence. But through patience. Several people nodded. Victor continued. People don't lose everything because they are weak. They lose everything because they trust the wrong person. A few guests laughed. I felt sick. To them, families weren't people. They were opportunities. Rebecca stood and clicked a remote. A large projector screen lit up. One by one, photographs appeared. Different houses. Different families. Different elderly couples. Each image stayed on the screen for only a few seconds before changing. Next to every photograph, a single word appeared. Completed. Then another. Completed. Again. Completed. My stomach tightened. There were dozens of them. Maybe more. Suddenly, a new photograph appeared. I froze. It was my house. The home my late wife and I had spent nearly 30 years building. Below the picture, instead of completed, it read, pending. Victor frowned. This file should already be closed. Rebecca lowered her head. I'm handling it. No. Victor replied calmly. You're fixing it. His voice wasn't loud. But the room instantly became silent. Daniel slowly reached for his glass of water. His hand trembled slightly. The hidden camera captured every face around the table. Sarah whispered. We have them. Michael shook his head. Not yet. What do you mean? If we move now, we only catch the people in this room. What if there are others? Sarah understood immediately. She looked back at the screen. We wait. Just then, one of Victor's assistants entered the dining hall. He leaned close and whispered something into Victor's ear. Victor's smile disappeared. He slowly scanned the room. Then, his eyes stopped on Daniel. My heartbeat exploded. Daniel remained perfectly still. Victor walked toward him. One slow step at a time. The room became silent enough to hear footsteps. He stopped beside Daniel. Then smiled. You've been unusually quiet tonight. Daniel forced a small smile. Just tired. Victor nodded. I understand. Then, he placed one hand on Daniel's shoulder. The hidden camera shook slightly. Victor leaned closer. So tell me. Can I trust you? Inside the surveillance van, no one breathed. Daniel looked Victor straight in the eyes. You've trusted me this long. Victor continued smiling. For several endless seconds. Neither man moved. Finally, Victor laughed. I suppose you're right. He patted Daniel on the shoulder and walked away. Everyone in the van exhaled at once. But Sarah wasn't smiling. He suspected something. I know, Michael replied. And next time, he won't ask. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes. Then Victor clapped his hands once. Ladies and gentlemen, our next project. Rebecca dimmed the lights. A new photograph appeared. A smiling elderly couple stood in front of a beautiful lakeside home. Beside the picture, their names, their address, even the estimated value of their property. Victor calmly pointed toward the screen. They are celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary next month. He smiled. They have no children. They'll be easy. My chest tightened. Another family. Another trap. Another life about to be destroyed. Sarah immediately turned to her team. We're done waiting. She picked up her radio. Move in. Within seconds, unmarked vehicles surrounded the country club. Agents quietly took their positions. Every exit. Every entrance. No one would leave unnoticed. Victor was still speaking. Completely unaware that the walls were closing around him. Or so we thought. Suddenly, every light inside the dining hall went out. The camera feed went black. The transmission ended. A loud alarm echoed through the building. Sarah grabbed her radio. Go. 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 Agents rushed toward every entrance. But as emergency lights flickered on, the ballroom was empty. The chairs remained. The glasses remained. Dinner was still on the table. But Victor, Rebecca, and every single guest had vanished. Only one person remained standing alone in the middle of the room. Daniel. He looked directly into the nearest security camera. Then slowly raised one hand. Not to surrender. To point toward the floor. Before anyone understood what he meant, the wooden floor beneath him suddenly collapsed. Daniel disappeared into darkness. And the hole closed behind him. As if he'd never been there. Daniel. My voice echoed through the surveillance van. The monitors had gone black. Agents were shouting over their radios. Everyone was talking at once. Sarah slammed her hand on the table. Silence. The room instantly became quiet. Report. Static crackled through the speakers. Then one agent answered. The ballroom is secure. No suspects. No underground entrance. Sarah frowned. What do you mean no entrance? The floor is solid. I stared at the screen. That was impossible. We had all watched Daniel disappear. Minutes later, we entered the ballroom ourselves. The room looked exactly as it had moments earlier. Half-filled wine glasses still sat on the table. Plates of untouched food remained warm. Chairs were pushed back as if people had stood up in a hurry. But there wasn't a single person inside. Michael walked to the center of the room. This is where Daniel was standing. He stomped on the wooden floor. Solid. No hollow sound. No trapdoor. Nothing. It doesn't make sense. Sarah knelt beside the floorboards. Then she smiled. It doesn't have to. She pointed toward a tiny scratch. The wood moved. What? Not down. She looked up. Sideways. Within minutes, engineers arrived with thermal scanners. One technician slowly passed the scanner across the floor. Most of the room glowed blue. Then, a long red rectangle appeared beneath the ballroom. A hidden chamber. Nearly 30 feet long. Sarah looked at her team. They built another room underneath. But where's the entrance? The technician followed the heat pattern. It ended beneath the massive fireplace. Two agents pushed the stone mantel aside. A concealed steel elevator appeared. Michael whispered. They planned this years ago. The elevator descended slowly. 10, 20, 30 feet. The doors opened. We stepped into a long underground hallway. Fresh tire marks covered the concrete floor. Someone had left only minutes earlier. Sarah examined them. 2 vehicles. Maybe 3. We hurried forward. The hallway split into several tunnels. One led toward a loading dock. Another toward an abandoned warehouse. A third toward darkness. Then we heard it. A faint cough. Daniel. I shouted. No answer. Only another cough. We followed the sound. At the end of the tunnel stood a heavy steel door. It had been locked from the outside. Agents forced it open. Inside, Daniel lay on the floor. His wrists were tied. Blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow. He slowly opened his eyes. Dad. I rushed toward him. He tried to sit up. They escaped. I know. He shook his head. No. You don't understand. They wanted us to find this place. I frowned. What do you mean? He pointed weakly toward the corner of the room. There rested an old desktop computer. Still running. Sarah immediately called in her cyber team. Within minutes, they had bypassed the password. The screen displayed a countdown timer. 9:43. What is that? One technician's face turned pale. The hard drives. They are wiping themselves. Can you stop it? I'm trying. The timer continued. 8:57. 8:56. Every second meant more evidence disappearing forever. The technician typed furiously. No. No. Come on. Then. The timer froze. 0:41. He leaned back with relief. I've got it. The room erupted in cheers. Dozens of folders appeared. Financial records. Encrypted messages. Voice recordings. Surveillance videos. Everything Victor had ever stored. Sarah smiled for the first time. This is enough. No. Michael corrected her. This is the beginning. Just then, a notification popped onto the screen. New message received. No sender. No subject. Only one sentence. Congratulations. You passed the first test. The room fell silent. Then another line appeared. Now let's see if you can save the next family. A map slowly loaded onto the monitor. A blinking red dot flashed on the edge of the city. Below it, a countdown. 23 hours 59 minutes and 58 seconds. 24 hours. Whatever Victor had planned, it had already begun. And somewhere, another innocent family had no idea they were about to become his next victims. I looked at Sarah. Then at Daniel. Finally, I understood. This was never about revenge. It was about stopping a man who treated people's lives like pieces on a chessboard. And the next move was ours. The countdown had already begun. 23 hours 58 minutes and 41 seconds. No one in the room moved. The blinking red dot on the map pulsed like a heartbeat. Sarah looked around. Trace the location. Within seconds, one of the technicians answered. It's an estate outside Millbrook. Owner. A few keystrokes later, another file appeared. William and Eleanor Brooks. Married for 52 years. No children. Retired school teachers. Their home sat on 20 acres of land overlooking a small lake. Estimated value. Nearly $4 million. Victor hadn't chosen them by accident. Sarah grabbed her radio. Team Alpha with me. She turned to another group. Team Bravo, secure this tunnel. Then she looked at me. Edward. I know what you're going to ask. I interrupted. I'm coming. She hesitated. This could become dangerous. So could sitting here. After a long pause, she nodded. Stay behind us. 40 minutes later, a convoy of unmarked vehicles pulled onto a quiet country road. The Brooks estate came into view. It looked peaceful. Freshly cut grass. Flowers lining the front porch. An American flag swaying gently in the evening breeze. Nothing about the place suggested danger. But appearances had fooled us before. Sarah signaled everyone to stop. No lights. No sirens. If Victor's people are here, they can't know we've arrived. Agents spread across the property. Some moved toward the back entrance. Others disappeared into the woods surrounding the house. Michael and I remained near the front gate. Watching. Waiting. Then, the front door opened. An elderly man stepped outside carrying a watering can. William Brooks. He looked completely relaxed. He had no idea his name had appeared on Victor's list less than an hour earlier. Sarah quietly approached him. "Mr. Brooks." The old man smiled politely. "Can I help you?" She showed her badge. His smile disappeared. "Is something wrong? We believe someone may try to contact you." He looked confused. "I've already met them." Every agent froze. Sarah stepped closer. "When?" "This afternoon. William invited us inside." His wife, Eleanor, sat in the living room arranging old family photographs into albums. She greeted us warmly. Neither of them seemed frightened. Only confused. William pointed toward the dining table. "They offered to buy the property." "Who?" "A very polite young woman." He smiled. "Rebecca." My stomach tightened. William continued. "She said she'd return tonight with the paperwork." Sarah glanced at her watch. 8:43 p.m. "They are coming." Just then, a vehicle approached the long gravel driveway. Headlights appeared through the trees. Everyone took cover. The luxury SUV rolled slowly toward the house. It stopped near the front porch. Rebecca stepped out. She was smiling, holding a leather briefcase. She had no idea we were waiting. She knocked gently on the front door. "Mr. Brooks. I've brought the final documents." Before William could respond, Sarah opened the door herself. "Good evening, Rebecca." For the first time since I'd known her, Rebecca looked genuinely shocked. Her smile disappeared. She took one step backward. Then another. She turned and ran. "Move!" Sarah shouted. Agents rushed from every direction. Rebecca sprinted toward the SUV. The driver slammed the accelerator. The vehicle shot backward, spinning gravel across the lawn. Rebecca jumped inside just as agents reached the passenger door. The SUV crashed through the wooden front gate and sped onto the highway. After them, 5 unmarked vehicles launched into pursuit. Sirens finally echoed through the night. The chase had begun. Inside the speeding SUV, Rebecca grabbed a satellite phone. She dialed one number. The call connected instantly. "It's me. We've been compromised." A calm voice answered. "I expected that. What do we do now?" There was a brief silence. Then Victor spoke 4 chilling words. "Activate Phase 2." The call ended. Rebecca slowly lowered the phone. For the first time. Even she looked afraid. Because whatever Phase 2 meant, it wasn't part of the original plan. And somewhere, Victor Kane had just decided to stop running. He was about to strike back. The chase stretched across 3 counties. Rebecca's SUV weaved through traffic with reckless precision. She wasn't driving randomly. She knew exactly where she was going. Sarah's voice crackled over the radio. "Keep your distance. Don't force her. If she's leading us somewhere, I want to know where." The convoy slowed slightly. Instead of cornering Rebecca, they followed. For nearly 30 minutes, the SUV stayed ahead. Then the city lights disappeared behind us. The highway narrowed into a lonely mountain road. Dense pine trees surrounded both sides. No houses. No businesses. Nothing. Michael looked at me. "She's heading somewhere isolated." I nodded. "Somewhere prepared." Suddenly, Rebecca slammed on the brakes. The SUV skidded sideways across the road. Before anyone could react, she jumped out and sprinted into the forest. "Go!" Sarah shouted. Half the agents chased Rebecca. The other half secured the vehicle. Michael and I stayed behind. Something felt wrong. Too easy. One of the agents opened the driver's door. Clear. Another searched the back seat. Nothing here. Then a third agent opened the trunk. Everyone froze. Inside, there wasn't cash. There weren't weapons. There was a frightened young woman. Her wrists were tied with plastic restraints. A cloth covered her mouth. She couldn't have been older than 25. Sarah immediately cut the restraints. "It's okay. You're safe." The young woman burst into tears. They said my grandfather would die if I didn't cooperate." My heart sank. Victor wasn't just targeting elderly homeowners anymore. He was using their families as leverage. Meanwhile, deep inside the forest, Rebecca kept running. Branches whipped across her face. Her breathing became heavier with every step. She finally reached a small abandoned cabin. The door opened before she knocked. Victor stood inside. He didn't look surprised. He looked disappointed. "I told you not to panic." Rebecca struggled to catch her breath. "They found everything. The storage unit. The country club. They are coming." Victor calmly poured himself a cup of coffee. "No. They are following exactly the path I wanted." Rebecca stared at him. "What?" He smiled faintly. "Sometimes the best way to hide the truth is to let people believe they've already found it." Back on the road, the rescued woman finally managed to calm down. "My name is Lily." Sarah handed her a bottle of water. "Lily? Who took you?" "I don't know his real name. But everyone called him Victor." "When did they kidnap you?" 3 days ago. They wanted my grandfather to sign property papers. But he refused. So they took me." Michael quietly whispered. "This is bigger than fraud. It's organized kidnapping." Sarah nodded grimly. "And now we have a witness." At that exact moment, one of the agents searching Rebecca's SUV called out, "Sarah." She walked over. "What did you find?" The agent held up a tablet computer hidden beneath the passenger seat. It was connected to the dashboard. Sarah powered it on. A live GPS map appeared. Dozens, hundreds of blinking dots covered the screen. Each dot represented a different property. Some green, some yellow, some flashing red. Michael stared in disbelief. "What are those?" Lily looked at the screen and immediately started crying again. "I know." Everyone turned toward her. "You do?" She pointed at one flashing red dot. "My grandparents' house. It started flashing the night they took me." Sarah looked at the rest of the map. Then realization struck. This isn't a contact list. It isn't a property database. She slowly looked up. It's a target list. Silence filled the night. Hundreds of blinking dots. Hundreds of families. Hundreds of lives. Victor Kane hadn't built a criminal crew. He had built a nationwide network. Every blinking light represented someone who had no idea they were being watched. No idea their finances had been studied. No idea their family was being manipulated. Edward Hayes. William Brooks. And now, hundreds more. Sarah quietly closed the tablet. Then she spoke the words none of us wanted to hear. This isn't the end of the investigation. She looked at the endless map. It's only the beginning. Far away, hidden inside the abandoned cabin, Victor stood before a wall covered with photographs. He picked up a red marker. Without hesitation, he crossed Rebecca's picture off the board. Then he whispered to himself, "Every piece is replaceable." He uncapped the marker again and circled a new photograph. Mine. Edward Hayes. For the first time, I wasn't just chasing Victor Kane. I had become his next move. The silence inside the command vehicle was overwhelming. No one spoke. No one moved. Victor Kane had made his message perfectly clear. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was hunting. And somehow, I had become his primary target. Sarah looked around the room. From this moment forward, nobody works alone. She pointed toward the digital map. I want every red location identified. Every family contacted. Every officer briefed. The room immediately came alive. Phones started ringing. Computers lit up. Maps filled the screens. For the first time, Victor wasn't the only one with a network. Now, so did we. Back at headquarters, Daniel finally received medical treatment. The cut above his eyebrow required several stitches. Apart from that, he was physically unharmed. Emotionally, that was another story. I found him sitting alone outside the hospital, looking at nothing. I quietly sat beside him. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, he broke the silence. I almost believed him. I turned toward him. "Victor." Daniel nodded. He made everyone feel important. He always knew exactly what to say. If someone had debt, he offered money. If someone felt ignored, he offered respect. If someone felt lost, he offered purpose. Daniel laughed bitterly. I didn't realize. He wasn't building a business. He was building dependence. I looked at my son. For the first time in years, he wasn't making excuses. He was telling the truth. "Dad, I'm sorry. Not for one decision. Not for one mistake. For everything." The words were simple, but they carried years of regret. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll talk about forgiveness when this is over." Daniel nodded. "I understand." Just then, Sarah walked into the room. "We found something." She placed a tablet on the table. It came from Rebecca's encrypted cloud account. A video file. Recorded only 2 days earlier. Victor stood inside what looked like an old warehouse. Behind him, stacks of cardboard boxes reached the ceiling. He smiled at the camera. "If you're watching this, it means Rebecca failed." He didn't seem angry. He seemed amused. "I've always believed in backup plans." He stepped aside. The camera slowly revealed dozens of locked wooden crates. Each one carried a different family name. Not documents. Not money. Names. Sarah paused the video. "What do you think is inside?" Nobody answered. Because nobody wanted to guess. The next morning, a warehouse on the edge of the harbor became the center of the investigation. The address had been hidden inside the video's metadata. Dozens of agents surrounded the building before sunrise. No sirens. No lights. Everything depended on surprise. Sarah gave one final instruction. No unnecessary risks. If Victor is inside, we take him alive. The signal was given. The front doors burst open. Agents flooded into the warehouse. Federal agents. Nobody move. The echo rolled through the enormous building. Silence answered. The warehouse was empty. No Victor. No guards. No workers. Only rows and rows of wooden crates. Michael carefully opened the first one. Inside. Family photo albums. Old letters. Wedding rings. Military medals. Children's drawings. Pieces of people's lives. Not valuables. Memories. I looked around the warehouse. Victor hadn't been stealing objects. He'd been stealing identities. Their history. Their sense of home. Everything that made a family feel like a family. Then one agent shouted. I found something. Everyone rushed over. Behind a false wall. They discovered an office. Unlike the rest of the warehouse. It was spotless. A desk. A computer. A single chair. And hanging on the wall. A giant map of the country. Hundreds of colored strings connected photographs of families to names, businesses, lawyers, accountants, and financial advisors. It looked less like a crime scene. And more like the control room of a master strategist. Pinned in the center. Was one photograph larger than all the others. Mine. Across it. Victor had written 3 words in black ink. Break his hope. I stared at those words for several seconds. Then I smiled. Michael looked confused. Why are you smiling? I folded the photograph and slipped it into my jacket. Because he finally made a mistake. What mistake? I looked toward the map one last time. He thinks hope is something another person can take away. I shook my head. He doesn't understand. Hope isn't given. It isn't stolen. It's chosen. Just then, Sarah's radio crackled. Her expression changed instantly. What? The room fell silent. She slowly lowered the radio. Our surveillance team. They've found Victor. Where? She looked directly at me. He isn't running. He's waiting. The location appeared on the screen. The old Hayes family house. Victor Kane had returned to the place where this nightmare began. And this time, he wanted me to come to him. The address on Sarah's tablet didn't surprise me. It unsettled me. Victor hadn't chosen a random location. He had chosen my house. The place where my wife and I built our lives. The place where Daniel learned to walk. The place where every Christmas, every birthday, every family memory still lived. He wasn't after the property anymore. He was after something far more valuable. He wanted to break me. Nobody goes in until we know what we're dealing with, Sarah ordered. Within 20 minutes, the neighborhood was surrounded. Unmarked vehicles lined the nearby streets. Snipers quietly took positions on neighboring rooftops. Drones circled high above the property. Every possible exit was covered. Victor had planned for everything. So had we. Or so we hoped. A drone operator zoomed in on the living room window. Everyone crowded around the monitor. The same chair where I used to read bedtime stories to Daniel. He looked completely relaxed. A chessboard rested on the coffee table. Across from him, an empty chair. As if he were expecting someone. Me? Sarah studied the footage. No visible weapons. No bodyguards. Michael frowned. That's exactly what worries me. I couldn't disagree. Victor had never relied on strength. He relied on preparation. If he wanted us inside, there was a reason. Then the front door slowly opened. No one had touched it. A small envelope slid onto the porch. One of the bomb technicians carefully approached. After several tense minutes, he nodded. Clear. Inside the envelope, a handwritten note. It contained only one sentence. Edward, the game ends where it began. Come inside alone. Sarah immediately tore the note in half. Absolutely not. Michael agreed. He's trying to separate you from us. I looked back at the house. He already knows you won't let me go alone. Sarah crossed her arms. So maybe. He wants us arguing instead of thinking. Just then, Daniel stepped forward. I know that house better than anyone. We all looked at him. The attic. The crawl space beneath the stairs. The old furnace room. There are places cameras can't see. He pulled out a notebook and quickly sketched the floor plan from memory. Michael smiled. I'll be damned. You still remember every inch. Daniel nodded. I grew up there. The tactical team compared Daniel's sketch with the city's original construction records. Within minutes, they found something unexpected. A section of the basement didn't match the official blueprint. Sarah looked puzzled. Hidden room. The city engineer nodded. It was added decades ago. No permit. No inspection. No records. I stared at the screen. I had lived in that house for 27 years. And I never knew it existed. A fiber optic camera was carefully inserted through an old ventilation pipe. The image appeared on the monitor. The hidden room was empty. Almost. Against one wall stood a massive steel safe. Its door was already open. Inside, nothing. Except a single framed photograph. My wife. Smiling. Taken nearly 30 years earlier, during our first summer in that house. I felt my throat tighten. Victor hadn't stolen that photograph by accident. He wanted me to see it. He wanted this to become personal. Too late. It already was. Suddenly, one of the surveillance agents shouted. Movement. Everyone turned toward the drone feed. Victor stood up from the armchair. He looked directly into the camera hovering above the house. Then, he smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not an angry smile. The smile of a man who believed he had already won. He slowly raised his right hand. And snapped his fingers. Nothing happened. For 2 seconds. Everything remained still. Then, every light inside the house went dark. The drone feed filled with static. The tactical team's radios erupted with interference. The entire neighborhood lost power. Street lights. Traffic signals. Security cameras. Everything. Darkness swallowed the street. Only the moonlight remained. Then, a single spotlight illuminated the front porch. Victor stepped outside. Alone. Calmly dressed in a black suit. His hands visible. No weapon. He looked directly at me from across the front yard. Even from that distance, I could hear him. Edward. His voice echoed through the silent neighborhood. You've spent your life judging other people. He took another slow step forward. But tonight. He smiled. It's your turn to decide. Then he reached into his jacket. Every sniper tightened their aim. Every agent held their breath. Victor slowly removed a small brass key. He held it up so everyone could see. This, he said quietly, opens the one place you've been searching for. He tossed the key onto the driveway. It landed with a metallic clang. Then Victor raised both hands. I'm unarmed. If you want me, come and get me. At that exact moment, a deafening explosion echoed from somewhere behind the house. The ground trembled. Every officer instinctively turned toward the blast. Just for a second. Only 1 second. When everyone looked back, Victor Kane was gone. Once again. The explosion shook the entire neighborhood. Windows rattled. Car alarms erupted in every direction. For one brief moment, chaos replaced order. Report. Sarah shouted into her radio. Rear garden. Smoke near the detached garage. Tactical Team 3 moving in. Everyone rushed toward the source of the blast. Everyone. Except me. I kept staring at the empty driveway. Victor hadn't escaped, because he was lucky. He escaped, because he had planned for that exact second. Michael ran back toward me. Edward. What? The key. I looked down. The small brass key Victor had thrown was still lying on the driveway. Untouched. I picked it up carefully. It felt old. Heavy. On one side was engraved a single letter. L. Nothing else. No number. No manufacturer. Just one letter. Meanwhile, the tactical teams searched every inch of the property. No hidden tunnel. No secret vehicle. No footprints leading away. It was as though Victor had vanished into thin air. Sarah walked over. I don't believe in magic. Neither do I. So where did he go? I looked at the old house. Maybe. He never left. Daniel joined us carrying the original floor plan. He spread it across the hood of a patrol car. Look here. He pointed toward the basement. The hidden room. Then he traced his finger farther west. These walls. They're much thicker than they should be. Michael leaned closer. Meaning? Daniel smiled. There could be another passage. Within minutes, engineers brought ground-penetrating radar. They slowly scanned the basement floor. A technician suddenly raised his hand. I found something. The screen revealed a narrow tunnel. Not beneath the house. Beyond it. Running almost 200 feet underground. Straight toward the abandoned church across the street. Sarah looked at me. So that's how he disappeared. I nodded. He planned his escape years before we ever met. The church had been abandoned for nearly 15 years. Its broken stained glass windows reflected the flashing emergency lights outside. The front doors hung slightly open. No one had touched the building in years. Or so everyone believed. The tactical team entered first. Weapons raised. The rest of us followed several moments later. Dust covered every pew. Cobwebs stretched across the ceiling. Everything looked untouched. Until Daniel stopped. Listen. A faint ticking echoed through the empty sanctuary. Tick. 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 Sarah immediately raised her fist. Nobody move. A bomb technician carefully searched the room. The sound wasn't coming from the altar. or the walls. It was coming from beneath the old wooden floor. After several tense minutes, he smiled with relief. It's not an explosive. What is it? He pried up a loose floorboard. Hidden underneath was an antique pocket watch. Still ticking. Attached to it, a folded note. I opened it carefully. Victor's handwriting was unmistakable. Edward, if you're reading this, you've finally stopped chasing me and started thinking like me. Good. Because this was never about who could run faster. It was about who understood people better. You think I'm hiding. I'm not. I'm watching. Every decision you make teaches me something. Every move reveals your next move. You've always believed justice is about punishment. I believe justice is about choices. Tomorrow, you'll have to make one. There was no signature. Only another symbol. A wolf's head. As I folded the letter, Michael noticed something else inside the pocket watch. A tiny memory card. Sarah handed it to the forensic technician. Within minutes, the video appeared on a laptop screen. Victor looked directly into the camera. If you've reached this point, you've already figured out that Rebecca was never my partner. The room fell silent. She was my employee. I trained her. I trusted her. And she failed. He smiled faintly. Failure has consequences. The video abruptly cut to Rebecca. She was tied to a chair. Alive. Terrified. Looking directly into the camera. Before she could say a word, the screen went black. Daniel stepped backward. No. Sarah immediately turned to her team. Trace the video. The technician typed furiously. It's recent. Less than an hour old. Can you find the location? He stared at the screen. Then slowly nodded. I think so. A map appeared. Not across the city. Not across the state. Only 3 miles away. An old riverside factory that had been abandoned decades earlier. Michael looked at me. This is it. I wasn't so sure. Victor had fooled us before. But something felt different this time. Rebecca wasn't bait anymore. She had become a liability. And desperate people make dangerous decisions. I looked toward the flashing red marker on the map. Then quietly said, let's finish this. The convoy raced through the empty streets. No sirens. No flashing lights. Sarah wanted one thing above all else. Surprise. If Victor realized they were coming, he would disappear again. This time, no one intended to let that happen. The abandoned riverside factory emerged through the morning fog. Broken windows. Rusted steel beams. A faded company sign hanging by a single bolt. From the outside, it looked deserted. Inside, it was anything but. Thermal drones detected movement. 7 people. 1 large room. No obvious exits. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. We've got them. Agents quietly surrounded the building. Snipers took positions on nearby rooftops. Every road leading away from the factory was blocked. Escape was no longer an option. Sarah looked at me. This ends today. I nodded. It has to. The signal was given. The factory doors burst open. Federal agents. Nobody move. Chaos exploded inside. Some of Victor's men dropped to the floor immediately. Others ran toward the rear exits. only to find armed agents waiting. Within seconds, 4 suspects were in handcuffs. A 5th surrendered without resistance. But Victor was nowhere to be seen. "Clear the building," Sarah shouted. Room after room was searched. Storage rooms, offices, machine halls. Nothing. Michael frowned. "He's here. He has to be." Daniel stopped walking. "Listen." A faint metallic sound echoed through the factory. Clang. 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 Someone was climbing a steel staircase. "Roof!" Daniel yelled. Everyone sprinted upward. Victor stood alone on the rooftop. The river stretched behind him. There was nowhere left to run. He looked surprisingly calm. Almost relieved. "So," he smiled, "you finally caught up." Sarah raised her weapon. "It's over, Victor." He laughed softly. "No. It ended the moment people stopped believing my lies." He slowly removed a small flash drive from his pocket. This was always the real prize. Without warning, he threw it toward the river. "No!" Daniel shouted. Without thinking, he dove from the edge of the roof onto an old maintenance platform hanging above the water. The platform collapsed beneath his weight. But before it fell, he caught the flash drive in midair. Then plunged into the river below. "Daniel." I ran to the edge. The current carried him several yards downstream. For one terrifying moment, he didn't surface. Then, a hand broke through the water. Agents rushed to pull him safely onto shore. He was exhausted, cold, barely able to breathe, but still holding the flash drive tightly in his hand. He looked up at me and smiled weakly. I wasn't going to let him win. Victor watched silently. For the first time, his confidence disappeared. Sarah stepped forward. "Victor Kane, you're under arrest." He didn't resist. He slowly held out his hands. The handcuffs clicked shut. The man who had manipulated families for years, who believed he could control every move, who treated people like pieces on a chessboard, had finally run out of moves. As agents escorted Victor away, he stopped beside me. "You think you've won?" I looked him in the eyes. "No. I think the families you hurt finally have a chance to heal." Victor gave one last smile. "People like me will always exist." "Maybe," I replied calmly. "But so will people willing to stand against them." For the first time, Victor had nothing to say. He lowered his head and walked away. Sarah approached with the recovered flash drive. Our technicians checked it. "What was on it?" She smiled. "Everything. Financial records, hidden accounts, encrypted messages, lists of every victim, every recruiter, every transaction. Years of evidence. Enough to dismantle the entire network." Michael looked toward the rising sun over the river. "It really is over." I watched Daniel sitting in the ambulance, wrapped in a blanket. For the first time in years, he looked at peace. The nightmare that had torn our family apart was finally coming to an end. 3 months later, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. Camera flashes lit up the entrance. News vans lined the streets. People from across the country had followed the case from the beginning. Today, they would finally hear the verdict. Inside the courtroom, Victor Kane sat silently beside his attorneys. For the first time, he looked ordinary. No confidence. No smile. No control. Just another man waiting to hear his future. Across the room, Rebecca sat at a separate table. After choosing to cooperate with investigators, she had revealed dozens of hidden accounts, safe houses, and members of Victor's organization. Her testimony helped rescue several families before they lost everything. She would still answer for her crimes. But she had finally told the truth. The courtroom became silent as the judge entered. Everyone stood. After reviewing months of evidence, hundreds of witness statements, financial records, recovered files, and Daniel's undercover recordings, the judge looked directly at Victor. The evidence against you is overwhelming. You built an organization based on deception, intimidation, fraud, kidnapping, and the deliberate destruction of innocent families. You treated human lives as business opportunities. He paused. Then delivered the words every victim had waited to hear. On all counts, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. Some people cried. Others hugged one another. Several elderly couples simply held hands in silence. For them, justice had finally arrived. Outside the courthouse, Sarah stood beside me. We've identified more than 300 victims. She smiled. And thanks to the evidence from that flash drive, most of their properties have already been returned. Michael joined us. Victor's entire network collapsed. Every major recruiter has been arrested. Every hidden account has been frozen. Years of lies had ended in a single courtroom. A week later, Daniel and I returned to the old family house. It had taken months to repair the damage. Fresh paint covered the walls. The broken windows had been replaced. The garden had begun to bloom again. It finally felt like home. Daniel stood quietly on the front porch. I don't expect you to forget what happened. I looked at him. I won't. He lowered his head. I don't expect you to forgive me today either. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I handed him an old brass key. The front door still sticks. He looked confused. You have to lift it slightly before it turns. Daniel smiled through tears. Just as he had done when he was a little boy. You still remember. I never forgot. He unlocked the door. And together, we walked inside. Not as strangers. Not as enemies. But as a father and son beginning again. Later that afternoon, Maria stopped by with homemade cookies. She laughed as she looked around the living room. It finally feels peaceful. It does. I replied. You were brave. She smiled modestly. I was just trying to do the right thing. Sometimes, that's exactly what courage is. That evening, the entire family gathered in the backyard. The same backyard where birthdays had once been celebrated. Where my wife had planted her favorite flowers. Where laughter had disappeared for far too long. Children ran across the grass. Neighbors stopped by to say hello. For the first time in years, the house was filled with life instead of fear. I looked toward the empty chair beneath the old oak tree. The one my wife used to sit in every summer. Softly, I whispered. We made it. The wind gently stirred the leaves above. And somehow, it felt like she already knew. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized something. Justice doesn't erase the past. It doesn't remove every scar. But it gives people something just as important. A chance to write a better future. And sometimes, that's the greatest victory of all.